Hello, I'm Emily Barker and welcome to our panel discussion on the Australian National Engineering Task Force, a new initiative to promote the profession. Joining me in the bunker are Stephen Durkin from Engineers Australia, Megan Motto from Consult Australia, Chris Champion from the Institute of Public Works Engineering Australia, and IPWEA CEO Chris Walton. Stephen, I'll start with you. ANET was launched at the end of 2010. What was the catalyst for the creation of the task force?
Well, the background to ANET is really relating to the skills shortage in Australia, and it's an issue that's increased significantly over the past 10 years. So ANET has been an attempt to bring together leaders from the profession, from industry, from the education system to come together to try to solve a problem that's of significant concern, not just for the profession, but for the future of this country.
And Chris, how has ANET changed the way the industry deals with these, structural issues?
Well, for us, it's about a coordinated voice for the profession instead of being 4 or 5 or 6 different groups. In our case, we're fairly small, but working together as a coordinated collaborative group, we're getting the runs on the board. And I think already with the Senate inquiry recommendations, that's a big outcome. And now we're working together to turn those recommendations into actions.
Megan, what sort of response have you got from your members?
Look, our members being the private sector really love it because they operate in a world where collaboration is king. And so they love the fact that as industry we're working together to tackle solutions which we've recognised now are systemic, not cyclical as they were 20 or 30 years ago due to the infrastructure market fluctuations. So they really love the collaboration, and in particular they really love the long-term approach that we're coming to this. The complex solutions are just as complex as the problems that have caused the skills crisis. So it's really important that we work together and think the long term.
And Chris Walton, what's been the response from Canberra?
Because the profession and industry is working together, we're getting heard in Canberra. Not only the Senate inquiry, as Chris mentioned, which is terrific, has put in a government statement that's acknowledged the problem and the consequences of the problem, but we're now having multiple meetings with ministers. We had a 2-hour meeting with one of the senior ministers and head of the Senate just last week. So because we're together and because industry's there, we're getting listened to.
So Stephen, what is the number one issue facing the profession?
Well, I think in relation to skills shortage, the major impact of that lack of skills is the impact on critical infrastructure projects in this country. So we see through various research that we've carried out via ANET that there's a significant delay in terms of some of those major infrastructure projects going ahead. We're seeing an increase in terms of average salaries. So the fact that there aren't enough engineers is actually leading to some inefficiency in terms of those projects going ahead and the system overall. I think if you peel that back a bit, the root cause of that is we simply don't have enough engineers coming through the system. We don't have enough secondary students studying science and maths. We don't have enough students going on to study engineering at university and then going on to practice as engineers. And I think it's a really significant problem for this country.
Why do people not want to study engineering?
Look, it harks back right to primary school. We tend to have supported a generation even of teachers who come from a humanities background and don't have a high level of degree of confidence teaching the science and maths. And that really translates into we don't have enough science and maths teachers of suitable qualifications in high schools in Australia, and that translates then into students not having the maths and science skills that are prerequisites for going on and doing engineering at university. So there's a real structural problem right through the education system. We've also got a bit of an image problem, I think, for engineers in Australia, and we need to sort that out as an industry. You know, engineering is something that's really exciting. You can change the world. It can be a launching and a platform education, if you like, for a multiplicity of different careers that young people want to have 4 or 5 completely different careers now. An engineering degree can do all of that for you. So it doesn't box you in, and we really need to sell that better. The other thing is that, so many other industries are in huge demand for engineers. So being an engineer doesn't just leave you in line for an infrastructure industry or a certain sector. You can go into banking, you can go into finance, you can go into management consulting. And instead of whinging about the slice of the pie that infrastructure gets, we should be celebrating that all of these industries want engineers and increase the size of the pie.
And Chris Champion, you agree?
Yes, and I think it's besides, as we were talking before, about a coordinated approach where we're all coming together, another issue or challenge for us as engineers is getting our message across, explaining to the community, to the politicians, exactly what we do and the importance of our role in Australian society. So that's something, working together, I think we're being more effective in communicating that message.
And Chris Walton, we have touched on some of the solutions. Is this a government problem, or is this a problem for the profession?
Well, I think it's a problem for this country. You know, we're estimated to be 43,000 engineers short over the next 5 years, the Senate report found, and Skills Australia. And so with that shortage, there's dramatic consequences. Consequences for our infrastructure. It's estimated we're blowing, because we can't scope projects properly, we're blowing on average around about 20% of our infrastructure spend, and we just can't afford to lose 1 cent. So delays in projects, infrastructure, of course engineers are also critical to innovation in this country. So if we don't get this right, there's significant consequences.
What are the consequences then?
Well, I think in a political sense, you know, one of the real issues here is that through those delays that Chris has talked about, that effectively is costing this country significant money in terms of those projects not proceeding, and the inefficiencies of those systems, you know, create a lot of sort of money spent unnecessarily for whether it's employer groups or whether it's for the governments themselves. So I think it leads to a lot of inefficiency and a lot of overspend in the economy.
And the way that resonates with the Australian public ultimately is more time sitting in your car in congested streets, less time out with your family enjoying the things that you should. The urbanisation in Australia is absolutely a critical part of the Australian fabric, because we now have 80% of people living in the major cities. We've got the cities produce 85% of Australia's economic activity. So, you know, getting those issues right, getting the building, the planning and the infrastructure connecting our cities right is so important just for the livability for everyday Australians.
And we've got to a point where the government has so few engineers in it, they're not even an informed purchaser of services, which also, in attempting to shift all the risk to the private sector, isn't working either. So it's just breaking down. You know, government not an informed purchaser, not enough support for the private sector to develop the skills, and as a result we got consequences.
Well, it's interesting where there are shortages of teachers and nurses, there would be a public outcry. Why is there not that sort of a reaction when it comes to engineers?
I like to explain it how, we have family doctors, we have family lawyers perhaps, but we don't have a family engineer. So engineers aren't working directly with the community in that sense. So we have to try other ways to get our message across and better explain to the community exactly what we're doing.
And that means talking to your members as
well?
well?
I think talking to members, and I think exactly as Chris Champion described before, it's telling our story in a different way. It's helping the general public understand what engineers do, the valuable services that engineers provide in terms of our quality of life in this country, and making sure that people are clear in terms of that being a really, really successful, great career for young people to move into. And I think if we do that effectively and tell that story in a different way, we'll ultimately see more people attracted to the profession.
And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, this is a sales campaign for engineering, because it is a bit of a hidden profession. To relate it to a different profession where success means that everyone notices you, in engineering, success is when no one notices what you did, because it just works seamlessly. So it is a bit of a hidden profession, and I think that someone therefore has to get out on behalf of the profession and shout about it.
And I think our challenge is to link the profession to the community's interests and needs, as we've been saying. If you think of, does Australia need a high-end, high-skilled manufacturing sector in the future, and needs to be innovative? Do we need renewable energy? Do we need reduced greenhouse emissions? Do we need world-class infrastructure? Do we need better amenity in our community? If the answer to those things is yes, then our challenge is to get the community and governments to recognise that won't be achieved without engineers. Our members, engineers, are very frustrated about the lack of recognition the community has for their role. Our challenge is to link their role to the modern community needs and find the solutions.
Thank you all for joining us. And of course, ANET is an ongoing initiative, and if you would like to get involved, contact your organisation or visit the ANET website.